Hi, I'm Mike, and I've been laid off. Hi, Mike. Okay, yeah, great. Awesome. Great start. We're really burning out of the gate here. Obligatory intro. I'm currently a senior engineering manager at Lookout, which is in mobile device security. Currently managing a 100% back-end team, doing Scala, a little bit of Java, a lot of Kafka as well. We like things that end in I've been doing software for about 15 years now, mostly in the Columbus area. Had the pleasure to speak at a couple local conferences, including StirTrek. Thrilled to be speaking here again. Mostly I'm just thrilled to be back here again with all you nerds. Anyway, let's jump right in. So you lost your job. What now? Well, if you can, take a breath, and especially if you can, take a break. I got laid off, and I immediately took my wife out to lunch. They fortuitously scheduled my meeting with HR at like 11 or 11:30. Did that, lather, rinse, repeat. Took my wife out. Pizza, to be clear. This was no high-ticket meal. But I stepped away. I got together with someone, and I just took a couple breaths, right? I think each of these things is important. Some of these might be easier than others, but see what you can do. Get out of your space if you can. Get together with someone if you can. That's becoming much easier. And whether or not you can do either of those, just take a beat. I don't know your personality, but I can tell you, you want to be in the right mind to interview for your next position, right? And that starts here. What does that mean for you? Are you in a position to even determine that for yourself? Or do you need someone to help you kind of work through that? Who can you reach out to help you get back into that right mental space and help you work through it? Everyone's going to take this differently, but in my opinion, the truth is if you got laid off, it's not your fault. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's basically a C-suite issue, right? Aside from potentially, some really dramatic events like 2008, which affected almost every industry, no matter what. COVID obviously was a huge outside pressure, kind of no matter what you were doing. If you got fired, it might be your fault. It might not. I can't tell you which. You kind of need to be brutally honest with yourself. I can say that both are possible. But in any case, you need to take a beat to gather yourself. Don't immediately start trying to put your plan together. Take a little bit of a mental break. Maybe you have a hobby. Maybe you can exercise. Maybe you have some family, friends, even pets that you can spend time with. Watch a movie or an episode or two of a show that you're behind on. You've got time now. Read, write, listen to music. But you need to get yourself in that headspace, ready to move forward. You want to have a clear mind because now you need to kind of get a financial assessment of what's going on in your life together, right? You have a $3,000 laptop and a shopping cart, avoidable expenses. It's time to think about that, right? But it's more than that. How many weeks can you get by the way that things look right now? You kind of want to start getting an idea of what your time frame is. Because you have unavoidable expenses too, right? Rent, mortgage, utilities, loans, car payments, whatever they are. And then what do you have going for you? Do you have savings? Are you expecting some severance? Were you told that you might be receiving some severance? Again, when and how much? And then you want to get together an honest assessment of what are your escape valves, right? What are your emergency resources? Family, credit cards, borrowing against a 401k? Do you have something that you could sell if you needed to? You have a boat sitting around? I won't get into details on those because I don't want to give even general advice because it's very situational, right? And there's other better financially geared resources to that. But you kind of want to have an idea of if things get to whichever point, what levers can you pull to keep yourself going? having a plan like that in place can kind of help you get through those first couple weeks if things aren't moving as fast as you want to. Now, this exercise I think is helpful. Some people would say that it might be stressful, but I think even if you feel like something like that might be stressful to you, stress you out, you probably want to know sooner than later. Imagine how much more stressed out you might be to be surprised by that later instead of knowing that it's coming. One particular thing to pay attention to is healthcare. Healthcare typically goes in terms of months. So if you lose your job in the last week of the month, you don't have a lot of time to really do much about it. If you lose your job early in the month, you have a lot more wiggle room. But what you want to think about is, what can you maybe shift around to make your situation a little bit more advantageous? Do you have a prescription that usually gets filled at the beginning of the month? Can you move that up to the end of this month? Do you have an appointment coming up that you need to make? Can you move it? And don't just assume that it's not possible. No one really likes necessarily calling up anyone involved with anything medical and talking to them. It's usually kind of a pain. But if you get on the phone with them and you tell them why you're asking, you might be surprised how much they try to help you. We're all human, right? And if you can get a person on the other side of that phone, they may be able to help you. And you'd probably have to call them anyway if you were going to cancel, so you might as well try to move things around. Personally, I moved my family's regularly scheduled dental appointments back 1 month when I had hoped that I would be under coverage again. It was a simple thing to do, and true story, when my wife called to do that, the receptionist on the other end of the line was like, oh, I also know someone who got laid off by that same company, right? Two other things to mention, right? COBRA and healthcare.gov. COBRA's, right, the much more traditional way to keep your insurance going. It's going to be more expensive because your company isn't contributing to the premiums anymore. But under certain situations, that could very well be the right move for you. Healthcare.gov, obviously something that's much newer, also an option. Your benefits have changed. You're losing your health care, so you should be eligible to do something about it through that method. I won't get deep into either of those either, but it's just worth mentioning. And then as you're going through the interview processes for new companies, take note of when your health care would kick in. It's not unheard of that it would start on day one, but it's definitely still much more typical that it'll start like the first day of the next month. So again, be mindful when you're planning your start date, understand what the parameters are going into that, and you could, affect your coverage by, a full month by maybe making a simple change can make a big difference there as well. Then after all that, what you want to do next is understand what you need to do per the terms of your separation agreement, right? Especially if severance is on the line. If it's reasonable, make a plan to sign the agreement and get it done. Typically what's involved is making sure you return whatever company equipment they're asking for, and you sign some sort of document that might have some terms and stipulations in it. Make sure you read it and understand it though. Make sure you're willing to, that you agree and you're willing to follow through with what you're signing. Your employer will probably indicate a contact for you to ask questions, but sometimes the questions that you have, they might be better suited to you seeking your own independent resources and counsel on that, especially if you've been fired for certain reasons, like being a whistleblower or certain HR issues. So keep that in mind before you sign. It can be very hard or impossible to unsign something like that after you've committed to it. So find the time to read it and understand it. For me, it was worth it to sign it and comply with the terms of the agreement and receive my severance. So that's what I did. But it's a personal situation. It's situational. And it'd be based on the terms of the separation agreement that you're presented with. Next, I strongly, strongly recommend that you tell people. Don't be embarrassed. You don't need to be ashamed about this. It happens more often than you think. You'd probably be surprised by the amount and frequency when you tell people about this, how many people will say, hey, this happened to me, this happened to a friend, a family member. Like I said, my dentist's receptionist knew somebody, that we could kind of connect with on that level. It happens more than you'd think. But more than that, keep this in mind. The people in your life that are going to find out, who do you want them to hear it from? Your friends, your family, who do you want them to hear it from? Do you want your wife to find out because her sister's friend heard the news and asked her about it? That happened to me. Dodge that bullet. Do you want your kids to find out because someone in your circle, told them like, hey, it's going to be okay? Happened to me. Dodge that bullet. You want them to hear it from you, or at least I did, so I told them. The people who are going to find out anyway, I think it's better if it comes from the source. Now, of course, there might be those, one or two people who you don't want to explicitly tell for whatever reason. Okay, that's fine. But in my opinion, transparency is going to work out better in the long run. And I told my wife that she could tell people as well. It was okay. That was fine with me. But another reason is, you want people to know because people are going to want to help you. Sometimes that may be, in a way that you don't want, or it's a little bit too much, but people generally are going to want to help you. When I was laid off with 330 other people. And I can tell you that the community engaged, right, here in Columbus. So I guess one tip, if you're going to get laid off, do it in Columbus. This is a special place. We're really building something special here. It's a big, small town. It's a small, big town. And there really is not a better group of friends, acquaintances, and to be perfectly honest, even strangers that I think you'll find almost anywhere. I am really proud to be in this community, and I'm proud to be part of this community. The response, not only to my round of layoffs, but I think there was another one shortly thereafter. It was almost overwhelming, but there was a huge outpouring of support and assistance for all of those people, and it was really something to see and be part of. So if you don't live in this area, think about it, I guess. Now next, if you were laid off, reach out to everyone that you know that was laid off with you and tell them a couple things. One, that you're in this together. Obviously, you're literally in this together. You know what they're going through. So tell them they aren't alone. The daily stand-ups are gone. The company Slack instance is gone. It's harder to get in touch with some of these people, but if you have a way to connect with them, which is easier now than ever, reach out to them. Contact them and just let them know that you're in this together. Two, that this isn't a reflection on them. I touched on this earlier, but good people get laid off. Skilled people get laid off. People that have value get laid off. When this happens, I mean, again, it's not a reflection on anyone that gets laid off. It's a C-suite issue. I was laid off with half of an engineering org. To stick with the MCU theme, it was literally Thanos, right? It was completely dispassionate. You draw the line, these stay, these go. Companies figure it out however they figure it out, but the bottom line is they're letting people go that they literally don't want to. And three, and only say this if you mean it, but I hope that you do, ask them how you can help. Because that's what we do for each other, right? we support each other. We're all in this together. Next time it could be you. Next time it could be them. Everyone that I know that got laid off with me, I pinged them every Monday until they all told me that they accepted an offer. Sometimes we left it at that. Sometimes we talk a little bit more. Maybe there's a group of you that wants to get together. Maybe you all feel like you can't go out and spend money, but you can get together and watch a DVD, or make a meal together, or go on a walk, depending on the weather. It is Ohio after all. But you're all in the same place. Maybe you just want to get on a weekly call together to see each other's faces and hear each other's voices and spend a little bit of time and break away from what you're going through. But stay in touch with each other. Help each other through it. Okay, now we're actually getting to the point of where do we go from here, okay? We've got our heads on straight. We have a general plan. We've kind of gotten back on our feet, but at this point, you basically have three options, right? Okay, you could retire. Statistically, not an option for most people. I guess you could be in that boat. You could career switch. Maybe this is something you were thinking about anyway. Maybe it's as good a time as any if you kind of already had something in the back of your mind. Is this really what I want to be doing? But the assumption moving forward is that neither of those apply. And so what are we left with? Well, we're going to get back up and we're going to land on our feet. We're going to start over. We're going to put some effort into this. So we'll focus on this one. We'll start to unpack this a bit. Now, the traditional line used to be like, well, get your resume up to date, right? And you should. You're still likely to be asked for your resume. I was, and mine was not ready. But more importantly, at this point, you need to get your LinkedIn profile up to date. People will be searching for you and looking you up. Make sure you highlight the things that you want to get pinged about. We all know that recruiters are going to ping you looking for people with 10 years of experience for something that you don't even have, that you've never done before. But if you have something on your resume, that you're looking forward to doing again or that you want to get involved with, you will get pinged for that too. So make sure that it's there. That's your best chance to have those kind of opportunities come your way. And lastly, I've never done this, but there is a way on LinkedIn to mark your profile as open to work. I was a little scared about what would happen if I flipped that switch, but that is an option. And if you get to that point and you just say like, hey, I want to be flooded with opportunities, which I assume is what would happen, then flip that switch and brace yourself, I suppose. Obviously, you need to get some interviews. Now, if you're already getting pinged on LinkedIn and your calendar is full and it's things that you're interested in, great. Otherwise, think about what companies you want to target, right? What companies have you heard good things about? What companies have you heard interesting things about? What places did you interview at last time around that you liked that you want to revisit? What opportunities have you turned down recently because you had a position that you were happy with? Those are obviously hot leads that you could follow up with again now. It's fairly typical to get pinged, about things. Hey, have this opportunity available. Are you interested in talking? You turn it down. I'm not interested. I'm not available, whatever. I'm happy where I am. Oh, now your situation has changed. If that was something that you were interested in before, follow back up on it, even if you turn them down. If there's any particular scenarios that you want to be in, something that you've done before or haven't done before, now's your chance, right? The world is your oyster. So what do you want to do? There's a lot of different types of software. You want to do product work? You want to do SaaS? You want to try consulting? You interested in working for a startup? Any particular location that you want to be in? This matters less and less, but if you had to go into an office where would you want it to be? I was more interested, for instance, in remote work in the New England area. I have some ties to that area. So if a company said like, hey, we need you to come in quarterly. We have a big quarterly planning meeting. We want you to come in 2 days every quarter. That's where I'd want to go, right? Think about that. That's your option now. You're looking for a new job. Find a way to make it work for you. And then where's your network? You know, we'll talk more about your network later, but where are the people that you've worked with in the past? Where are they now? What are they saying about where they are? Do you want to interview there? Now here's one of the tricky parts, scheduling. I decided pretty early on I wanted to talk to a lot of places. I wanted to see what was out there. This was my chance to do something different. When I interview under normal circumstances, very selective. I interview one place at a time. If I like it and I get an acceptable offer, I take it. You know, I'm a simple guy. But that wasn't going to work this time. I was in a forced job search. So I decided that getting a job would be my job. I wake up in the morning, and that's my job, is to get a job. I was going to work at interviewing. I wanted to get exposure to a lot of different companies and environments and opportunities and see what was out there. I wanted to cast a really wide net. So I interviewed for manager positions. I interviewed for developer positions. I interviewed for architect positions. I interviewed for full stack. I interviewed for backend. I interviewed in multiple different languages. Local, not local, hybrid, remote, all kinds of stuff. I wanted to be surprised by something. You know, some recruiters, they'd ask me, they'd say, what are you looking for? I'd say, I don't know. I'd love to be surprised by something I never even thought was an option. You know, the last time that I had looked for work, I was looking in my local area. It ended up being, you know, work from home, but it was still a company that was local. And so things were very different now. The opportunities were a lot wider than before, and I didn't know that there was any one particular thing that I wanted to be pigeonholed into. So for 3 weeks, for 15 full working days, I had 86 interviews at 23 different companies. That's how I did it. It was a whirlwind. Now that's almost an average of 6 interview sessions per day, Monday through Friday, 3 weeks in a row. Now some of those were just catch-ups with an external recruiter, and a couple of those were times that I blocked off on my calendar to do a coding challenge or something like that. But you can see what I'm talking about. I filled my calendar. I made it my job. Even that first Monday, I got laid off on a Thursday. I started scheduling a couple things the next day on Friday. A couple people wanted to talk to me on Friday. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So the next Monday, I mean, I started basically bright and early. Well, bright and early, 9 a.m. You know? I'm my own boss at that point. I can take a meeting when I want to. But I blocked off time on my calendar for the coding challenges too. Because I meant what I said. You know, interviewing was my job. And my job ended at quitting time. So if I hadn't scheduled time to do those coding challenges, it would have been hard to get that done. But how did I get all that scheduled? First, extreme reliance on my calendar. Most things you'll get an invite for. A couple you won't. I thought it was a little unprofessional, but sometimes I would get scheduled a phone call with a recruiter and we would just agree on a time and that was that. You got to manually put that time on your calendar. Most things you'll get it'll be a video call, you'll get an invite for it, and so it'll go on your calendar. I always had a Google Calendar tab open. Use whatever calendar you want. That was my system. Gmail, Google Calendar. It was always right there, always on my screen. I could always see it, and I knew what was coming up later in the day and the next day. Second, prioritization. if there's an opportunity that you feel, is top tier, a company you're very interested in, an opportunity that you're very interested in, when I suggested that time, I blocked it off manually, which included, if I said like, hey, I'm available from 10 to 12, even though I knew it was only going to be, a 1-hour interview, I block off that whole time. And if the interview comes in, 10 to 11 or 11 to 12, you can remove your block, you can free some of that time up. But I left that block there. I knew that I had suggested that time for that opportunity that was important to me. And so I didn't want something else to come in there. I didn't want to suggest that time another way. Or if something else did come in that way, I knew in advance. Third, a willingness to have a schedule conflict. Not a preference, certainly not a plan to have a schedule conflict, but a willingness. If you schedule the number of interviews that I did, you're going to get some rescheduled on you from the other end already. It happens. It's okay. Things come up. People generally understand that. And if they don't, well, that's a good, at least yellow flag anyway. But a willingness to have a schedule conflict. I basically thought about it like I was relearning the lesson that I learned from Craigslist, like 15 years ago when I first tried to sell something on Craigslist. Someone contacted me. I said, hey, I want it. Love it. I'm going to come get it, tomorrow, whatever. You get a couple more coming in and you say, hey, sorry, item's been claimed, right? Of course, that first person never showed up. And so now you have all these other people who had interest, and I've already told them no. It becomes awkward. And it's kind of the same thing with managing your calendar and managing your time. You don't want to be a jerk about it, but you want to be willing to have something be double booked or at least back to back just to make sure that you can get those meetings in. But to be honest, I had very few conflicts. I typically had the next day fairly firm. I rarely had things scheduled same day. Maybe there was like 1 or 2 exceptions to that, but I usually had the next day really firm, and I was kind of scheduling, maybe 2 to 3 days out, typically. But you kind of develop sort of like strategies, right? It's like you're in a game called Interview Simulator, and you're developing calendar management strategies. You talk to the first place, and you say, hey, I'm generally available in the mornings. You talk to the second place, and you say, hey, late morning is when I expect to be available to talk to you. You talk to the third place, and you say, hey, right after lunch, that's when I have time. Could we find some time right after lunch in the next couple days? You talk to the fourth place, and you say something like, hey, can we squeeze this in at the end of the day? That's when I expect to be available. And so if you talk to 4 companies in a day, and you give them general availability like that, there's very little chance that you're going to have some kind of overlap. Another thing to consider is, for me, for instance, I was talking to a couple companies out in California. They're not going to want to interview me at 9 a.m. Eastern, right? Maybe there's, an early bird out there, but generally the interviews were, with maybe 2 people. You're not going to find 2 people who want to get up and be ready at 6 a.m., to interview me. I talked with another company that was based out of Boston with a second office in England, and I interviewed with someone from England as one of my calls. He wants to be at a certain time as well due to the time difference, right? He wants to be in the morning because it's the end of his day. That's when our schedule's lined up. So use the time zones to your advantage. They kind of have a natural rhythm to them. Now, if you're only talking with local companies or companies in your time zone, then there's obviously less of that to it. But if the companies naturally are going to have a preference for when your hours line up, then some of that, scheduling strategy kind of writes itself. Another thing, some of these companies much more often they'll send you a link, and it'll be some sort of calendar service or scheduling service where they detect your time zone, and you mark a couple times that you're free. But there was still plenty of times where people just asked me to tell them my availability, right? And when you do that, you might think like, oh, I've already talked to them a couple times, and they have my resume, and they know where I am. They know what time zone I'm in. I don't have to say that. Just always state it. Remove any doubt or confusion. Anytime you say, hey, I'm available 10 to 11, 1 to 2, and whatever, all times are Eastern, or wherever you are. You'd be surprised how many people think Ohio is in Central. You would probably not be surprised how many people forget where you are. I mean, right now the market's very busy. Everyone's talking to a lot of people, whether you're looking for a job or whether you're recruiting. They might remember your name, but they forget where you are. Just always say, remove any doubt. I had, thankfully, very few, but one or two little hiccups about, timing and scheduling. Do your best to remove any doubt about that, or you won't be on the call at the right time, or they won't be, or it'll get scheduled, overlap with something that you didn't want it to. And then, as I mentioned before, block off time for coding challenges. Now, I will do a coding challenge that I think is reasonable, and I did a couple. One in particular, was very tough for me. The kind where you get it and they say like, don't spend more than, 6 to 8 hours on this, and that's tough to schedule, even if you try to break it up, right? If your job is interviewing and you're trying to talk to a lot of places, that can be tough to do. When I received that one, I had, personal commitments on the upcoming weekend that I couldn't move. I was trying to do it. I was interested in the opportunity. I wanted to take a stab at it, but that was ultimately one that I had to pass on and turn down. I just couldn't find a way to work it in. So you might have to make some of those decisions. But like I said, I quit at quitting time, and then I moved on to family and hobbies and chores and life that I had to do, couldn't ignore. And so I made sure that I put time on my calendar, to work on coding challenges, or even a couple times just to practice, coding, to do, 1 or 2 problems from, XYZ online site, because I knew there might be a little bit of live coding in that interview, and I wanted to go back in being fresh. I was primarily interviewing for a language that I hadn't written professionally for almost a year. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to embarrass myself, going for, positions at the level that I was. And if you don't block that time on your calendar, it's easy for it to get filled, and then you're left with, well, do I do that in the evenings? Do I do that on the weekends? My only laptop was the company laptop that I had to send back. So I was less flexible about where and how I could do that. I had to be at my desktop. I always considered it a soft block. If something came in that was a priority, I can move that time around, but moving it around meant that I still had time blocked on my calendar for it. And I did do a couple of those. A lot of companies still want you to do that. Okay, let's talk about evaluating opportunities. Now, I never talk to some place that I don't see working out, right? I'm not going to work for Hitler Co. That's not something that I'm interested in doing. I'm not going to work in certain environments that I've learned I just don't enjoy, right? Sometimes you just know those things going in. Some people will tell you specifically to take those interviews because there's less pressure, because you're not going to be working there anyway. And so you can kind of use them as practice and kind of get some of those nerves out of the way. Personally, I just can't waste someone's time like that, and I feel like it's a waste of my time too, because you're interviewing for something that you don't want to do. So how much practice is that really? It's like practicing baseball when your sport is basketball. It's not completely unhelpful, but I don't think it's as helpful as some people suggest it would be. So if I know I'm not interested, I'm not interested. If you need interview practice, find a coworker. Maybe someone that you were laid off with, so you can return the favor and do it for each other. A friend or a family member. Find an online community, a Slack or Discord or subreddit, where people are doing those sorts of things. You'd be surprised how much people will help you with that. But so I never talk to someplace I have no interest in. One thing that I will do is, if I get an invitation to pursue an opportunity, and let's say maybe I like the company, but I don't like the opportunity, I'll reply and I'll say why it's not a fit. Reject it with an explanation. Now, when you do that, first of all, you're polite, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But secondly, you're actually giving them an opportunity to refit you on their end. So for instance, if you say something like, hey, it looks like your tech stack is Ruby. I'm doing Ruby right now, but I'm actually looking to move away from it. So this probably isn't a fit. Someone said to me, hey, thanks for letting me know. We actually have other teams using languages other than Ruby. Would you like to talk about one of those positions? Or if I said something like, hey, thanks for reaching out, Abu, this full stack position, my skill set and preferences, it's in the back end. So I don't think I'd be successful in this role. Someone said back to me, hey, I understand that. Our teams are full stack, but within the team, it's very common for developers to specialize on one side or the other. Would you be interested in talking if that's the case? True story. I got maybe the most impactful position of my career in a situation like this. And my current position had a flavor of this also. So if you get presented with an opportunity and you're like, hey, this looks great, except, say that. Like, wow, this seems perfect, but, say that. And whether or not you go and look at that company's public job postings and see something that's a better fit for you, just tell them why. Recruiters have access to more information than is made public. They also know, what job postings are going to be available soon, but aren't yet public. And you might even be able to get your foot in the door on something early when there's less competition if you say something like this and are able to get a response like that. So I said I never interview someplace that I know is not going to work out. But on the other hand, if I thought it was a low probability but that there was a chance, then I'm willing to schedule something and start a conversation. So for me, my advice, I do recommend talking with some places that don't immediately excite you, or you feel on the fence about them, right? If it just seems average, but you'd be willing to learn more, then learn more. Have you ever had a friendship or maybe even a relationship, surprise you? Someone that you thought you wouldn't get along with, you discover, a secret connection, a rare hobby that you both share, and all of a sudden you have this friendship or this relationship that's very deep and fulfilling. Or to be more specific, maybe you're on the fence about a company, you start talking with them, and you learn that one of their biggest issues is a problem that you'd love to help them solve. Right? That can be a huge win-win, and maybe all of a sudden you're very passionate about that. You say like, wow, I can work to turn this place into something that I'd really love to be involved in. So know what your reasons for passing on opportunities are, but if none of those reasons are present and you still feel it's lukewarm, keep an open mind otherwise. Prioritize opportunities, sure, absolutely. but consider more things than what are immediately obvious to you. And one reason is some places just move too slow for you to put all your eggs in one basket like that. For me, I was in, I think, maybe my third week, early in my third week of interviewing, and I was talking to some place that seemed okay, and they said, we had a good initial interview, and they said, well, just so you know, it's basically a 2 to 3 week process. That's what we do, right? It takes 2 to 3 weeks to get through our process. So at that point, I was in my third week. I was already starting to get some job offers, and I knew that I wasn't still going to be looking in 2 to 3 weeks. So I politely declined that one. That wasn't something that I thought that was worth either of our times to pursue. I just didn't have that much time ahead of me before I felt confident I was going to accept something. But secondly, some places that I tried to talk to, some places that even reached out to me, and I said, yeah, let's schedule something, I would get pinged 2 weeks later saying like, hey, sorry, could you send us your availability again? Let's schedule a conversation. I actually got a form rejection from a company that had reached out to me like 4 weeks later, saying like, hey, we've decided to move a different way with this position. I never even had an initial interview with them. We never even talked at all. I had already been in my new job at least 2 weeks, and I was still getting pinged by some of the companies that I had started conversations with and completely forgotten about. Some of them just moved too slow. However much you're interested in any particular opportunity, I strongly suggest you don't put all your eggs in that basket. And so you kind of want to cast a wide net and say like, hey, this doesn't seem as immediately interesting to me, but I have no reason to say no to it. If you have time in your schedule, talk to them. See what happens. It's your chance to interview them as they're interviewing you. See if something pops. If it doesn't, it's like speed dating. You move on. Okay, evaluating opportunities. Now, especially as you're talking to multiple places, be intentional about comparing the company culture, salary ranges, benefits, what the opportunity is, how much opportunity is there. Start understanding what's average, what's below average, above average. It'll be really important when you get your first legitimate job offer. Does this combination of culture and opportunity and salary and benefits, does it add up to a yes or a no? Even in the position that you're in, I know it's tough. I have been there. You don't have to accept your first job offer. So you want to know how it adds up. When you get that information, hopefully at the point that you're getting an offer, you have basically all the information you need, but hopefully you've got that information much earlier in the process, and hopefully you have that information from several other companies as well. And you kind of know when you get that offer, how does it stack up? How does it compare to the other things that you have going on, the other things that you're working on? Now, it's easy for me. I have a wife. I always say, hey, I don't make these decisions alone. I never accept a job offer on the spot. The job that I accepted, I think I called them back within, 15, 20 minutes and told them yes. But you don't have to accept your first job offer. You don't have to do it on the spot. You do want to keep an eye on your timeline, right? We looked at the finances. We know how long we have. As you're getting closer, maybe you're feeling like you need to take something, but especially if you're not at the end of your rope yet, don't sell yourself short. So you want to know how this stacks up with the other things that you're considering. So if you look up a company online and you don't find the info that you need to understand, you need to be asking those questions in an interview. You probably should be asking those questions to clarify, even if you feel like you do find that information in an interview, because you can post anything online. Use that stereotypical first meet and greet interview, whether it's with a recruiter or hiring manager, to get that information. Know what you want to know. You might not know what you want to know until you've done it a couple times and you start talking to people, but think about what you love about the companies that you've worked at in the past. Think about what you've not loved about the companies that you've worked at in the past, and ask questions tailored to those experiences. Figure out if this is a place that you'd want to be. Despite the position that you're in, you want to like your next job. Now, you're going to be asked what you're looking for in terms of a salary. A lot of people say, don't give out that info. I'm not here to give you a definitive answer on that, but I can tell you a couple things that I strongly recommend you don't do. Don't give an answer you aren't sure about. And I mean this most specifically in the sense that if you give an answer, you really don't want to be revising that answer, especially up, especially by 20, 30, 50% up after you get an offer. That's going to leave a real bad taste in the mouth. That's really not the way that you want to start this relationship. So if you don't know, don't give a number. If you're not sure, if you're still thinking about it, if you're still trying to figure it out, don't give a number. This has happened before, and I mean, I've seen companies just say like, this is a person we can't trust, forget it, we're moving on. We liked you, but this is not how we want to do things. If you don't know, don't say. Don't give a number that's completely out of line for the position that you're going for. Everyone should get what they're worth. I believe that. But as a hiring manager, I know if I don't have a chance of being able to put you in the salary range that I was approved for, or even if you're, if you have some info and you say like, put me right at the top of the salary range, that's really tough too, because how are you going to be able to get a raise if you're right at the top of the salary range? It's really hard to hire into the top of a salary range. If you're way out of line, a lot of hiring managers will say, hey, it's not worth the time investment. It's not worth the effort of me and my team to vet this person only to not be able to get the salary approved. Now, of course, the salary range is what it is, and you're worth what you're worth. Don't undersell yourself. Maybe that just means that's not the right position for you. But if you have some information about the salary range, you shouldn't really be asking for, at the top end, past the top end of that. It's really not worth anyone's time. And don't give an answer without understanding total comp. More and more these days, total comp is not just salary. Depending on where you're working, total comp might be, salary plus bonus plus stock or options. So don't get the two confused. Know what you're saying. If you're giving a number, know if you're giving a number for salary or for total comp, or for everything that's cash and wondering if there's a portion that's not. How do you view all those different components? But if you don't understand what the mix is and you give a number, it could be perceived the wrong way. If you think that you're giving a base salary and they think that you're giving total comp, your base salary is going to be much different than what you expect if you get an offer like that. So if you don't know, you can ask. And again, when you get an offer, it's tough, but you don't have to accept that first offer. I declined 2 and was considering a 3rd when I got my 4th offer, which was ultimately the one that I accepted. And by the way, I'll repeat my advice for declining opportunities. It's the same, probably even stronger for declining offers. If I'm going to turn down an offer, I'm almost definitely going to say why. I guess I could imagine a scenario where I wouldn't, but think about it this way. You've got through to the end of an interview process. It's because you had some interest and because they had some interest. If something's not right with the job offer, why wouldn't you want to have a chance to fix that? You've already invested a lot of time and effort. You thought that there was, something that was worth investing that time and effort in. So why would you let it die there? For me, I declined one due to salary. I declined the second due to the amount of time off that was offered. And when I did that, one of those offers got revised, the other one didn't. That's fine. But you're already declining the offer anyway. You're already saying no, so what do you have to lose? The way that I do business, I don't play offers against each other. But if I'm going to decline an offer, I'll say why, and if that means there's something that changes, that's fine. Maybe I'm now interested, maybe I'm not. I didn't ultimately take either of those, even the one that got revised. But that's just the way that it went. The third offer was good. There was nothing wrong with it, and there was a lot of positives. I would have accepted it, but the fourth one came along and was ultimately the one that I did accept. So I declined the third, and I said, I've accepted another position. There's nothing wrong with your offer. I just found a better fit somewhere else. There's really nothing that would have made that different for me. So that was just a polite no thanks. But the two that I declined first, I told them why. Now, why was I in a position to turn down the first three offers that I got? Or we can kind of title this, what to do before you get laid off. So I had my finances in order, right? My wife and I, we worked hard. We worked really hard earlier on in my career to be in a place where I knew that I could weather a financial storm of a certain magnitude, right? I was not ready to retire. I was also not ready to just take a couple months off. That wasn't something that was going to be possible. But I knew that I had some breathing room. I'm not saying that you have to be debt-free. That's one of my goals, but you don't have to be debt-free. I'm not saying that you need to have enough passive income to get by without a day job. Otherwise, the day job is optional anyway. But what does it mean to you in your situation? If you were laid off today, what would you want your finances to look like if that happened? If you lost your job, where would you want to be? What would you want to be in place in terms of having debt paid down or savings in the bank or some other source of income? Are you ready for that? I had skills. I had also put in the effort earlier in my career. I wanted to be good at what I did. I wanted to keep up with a changing industry. I wanted to keep up with a challenging field, to be able to demonstrate my skills and knowledge and experience. If you don't have that confidence, work on it. Work on it now. It's easier than ever, to practice coding. If there's a particular project that you're interested in, spend some time on it. If nothing particularly calls to you, there's any number of websites where you can practice katas or watch content and learn something new. Expand your boundaries a bit. I won't go too far into that because there's obviously a bit of selection bias here. You're already at a conference, obviously, but don't settle for that. Be a geek. It's even kind of trendy right now. And by the way, you can put all that stuff on your LinkedIn profile too. Things that you're interested in, but you're not actively working on professionally. You can put it on your LinkedIn profile. Who knows? Maybe it'll lead to some other opportunity that you're interested in. I had a network, and I mean this in a couple ways. And I've kind of mentioned throughout the talk, right, about being polite. You should be kind to everyone through this process, but also just always. Recruiters that you run into, be kind to them. The position that they have isn't right for you. Okay, you can decline it, but guess what? Recruiters talk. They talk to each other inside their companies, outside their companies. Recruiters are friends with other recruiters. You know you'll never want to work for the company that they're recruiting for. Recruiters change jobs. The next time you talk to them, they might be working for a different company. Don't leave a bad taste in their mouth. Teammates, managers, other people at your company, be kind to them. Developers talk too, right? You talk to people. Developers also change jobs. You want to be in a position where the worst that someone can say about you is like, hey, you know, Mike struggled when he was with us, but he was a great teammate. How well did he interview, right? When they hear that you're interviewing at their company, is that the worst that they can say about you? I'd be willing to work with him again. How well did he interview? How did he tech out? I had a number of recruiters that I knew, so I reached out to them. I'd always treated them with respect, and you know, they took my call and we had a chat. One particular recruiter that I was talking with, I had worked with him in the past in a previous job search. Didn't go that way, got another offer that I was interested in and accepted while we were in the interview process there. So I, told him what was going on, politely declined to continue. And so we started up a conversation again. And I found this out after the fact. There was no position, available at the time that I was interviewing with him. But he fought internally for me to get an interview anyway, because he knew from the last time around, what I was bringing to the table and how I approached things. So he fought for me to interview for a position that wasn't even available. Didn't work out that way again, but guess who I'm going to keep in touch with? Another recruiter I knew, I had worked with previously. She knew I had been at a company that went through layoffs. So she reached out to me, the next week. Hey, Mike, what's going on? How's it going? What happened? How are you doing? And only after that, right, she says, hey, I'm in a different place now. I know that you would do well here. Can I tell you about what we're doing, and can I get you to meet some of the team? That's a relationship that I'm going to keep active, right? Have those people in your Rolodex. Keep those relationships alive. Now, does this mean that I accept every LinkedIn request or respond to every message that I get? Absolutely not. But if I can tell that there's some effort put into it, or especially if I meet you in person, or you put a note in the message that explains it, it's likely that I'll at least respond. Secondly, I had former coworkers that I was on good terms with and still in communication with, right? That we were still talking with each other. And they're at all sorts of different companies now. Build those relationships and maintain those relationships. Now, you can't do that with everyone, and I never advocate faking it. But every relationship you do that with could be a lifeline for you. They move, they go to another company. Listen, a reference is great. A referral is great. But a recommendation from them, that time spent investing at that company is time well spent. That's gold. When your calendar is full and you're trying to decide where to spend your time during a forced job search, having someone say like, yeah, you should apply here, you should want to work here, you can't do much better than that. And when you're working with people, add them on LinkedIn. I never do that on day one, but that's a great way to keep in touch with people when all of a sudden the company Slack is gone, right? Or you move companies and you never got their phone number or whatever. Friend them on LinkedIn or whatever it's called on LinkedIn. That was one thing that I didn't really have in place. The last time that I'd done a job search, I hadn't really needed it. I knew the recruiter that I was working with, and so my LinkedIn was almost 2 positions out of date. Some of the early conversations that I had with recruiters, they asked me how or why I was working 2 places at once, which I wasn't, but I had updated LinkedIn wrong. And so that was a conversation that was it was easy to explain, but it would have been just as easy to get it right. But make sure that your companies at least are on LinkedIn. Recruiters are smart enough to have news alerts for layoffs, and they're like vultures, right? You'd be surprised how quickly you're going to start getting messages that say like, hey, I heard about what happened. Like, would you like to talk? But if the company's not there, they're not going to find you. And they don't know who's been laid off, and they don't know who hasn't. They're just looking for that company. You better make sure that it's there. And it's good to go back and update it and have some detail and have some information. But if you don't have that company there, they're not going to find you. And I had a resume. And I don't mean this as the document. My document was out of date. But having a solid job history, especially the most recent history of where you've been and what you're doing, is that what you want people to see if they're considering you for your next position? I'll say something a little awkward here, but do you have the job you want to be laid off from? If you think about that, is the job that you're in right now preparing you for the job search that you'd have if you were laid off? Are you working with a team that is known to have a good engineering culture? Do people at other companies want to work at the company that you're at now? It doesn't have to be Fang, or I guess Mang now, or anything like that. But like, have people heard of your company and they say like, yeah, like they have really strong engineers over there. I see them at conferences. I read their blogs. I know that that's someplace that I would want to work. Do you have that job or not? Are you working with a tech stack that you want to be working with? Is it preparing you for the next things that you want to do? Or are you stagnating? Have you plateaued? So I think that it's true in the large sense. It's a little cliche, but your skills, given enough time, are going to be the average of the people that you work most closely with. Is that team pulling you up or holding you back? Are you growing or decaying? So do you have the job that you want to be laid off from? And I mean, yes, there's the aspect of it that says like, yeah, if I'm going to get laid off, I want that company to have a culture where they're going to treat me as a person. You don't really want to work at a company that's really good at laying people off because they've done it so much, but they're going to treat you as a person. They're going to offer you severance. They're going to provide you some sort of resources to help you on your feet, and they're going to understand that they're putting you in a difficult situation. Is that the company that you're working for as well? Are you working for the company that you want to be working at, or would you rather be working somewhere else? Would you rather be working somewhere else specifically? And if you're not, use some of these tips and find that job now. Be in the job that you want to be laid off from. So that's the content that I have. I want to say thank you for coming. Thank you to the organizers and the volunteers. Thank you to the sponsors, CAS, a division of the American Chemical Society. And thank you to everyone out there who supported someone who lost their job, especially recently. Like I said, the community really responded in a big way. And I know that we all felt that on this side. I really appreciate that. Let's be there for each other. I don't know if this kind of talk lends itself to questions. I'm happy to take questions now. I think we have a little bit of time. But again, thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here. Really glad to be here with all you guys. Looking forward to the movie and I guess the Avatar 2 trailer. And I'll see you around the conference. Thank you.